Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Winton, and with me is Kenny Choi, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Well, good morning, Swami. Thanks again for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in today on the Voice of Yoga. We're going to talk about how to structure resolutions and discuss methods and how to get the best results for your efforts by aligning personal interests with the betterment of a greater whole. We all have unique talent. We all do something better than anyone else. It is our responsibility to develop this gift because we will be asked to contribute to the collective purpose of existence. We are part of a greater whole, and the universe is counting on us to deliver. Okay, Swami, so we're about a week into the new year. Let's talk about resolutions.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with regard to resolutions, I think the key question is, what am I trying to do? And in Kriya Yoga, the whole thing of this union of the individual with the divine. See, that's the one thing that enables us to, Carl Jung called it individuate. It's what enables us to become an individual. And without this internal connection, then of course our lives really never really begin. We don't move forward. And one of the things that I always talk about is offense is your best defense. That growth-based motivation will override survival-based motivation. Because most of us, that's what we are. We're stuck in survival-based motivation. And one of the things that I always think about is back in 1965, Bob Dylan wrote a song that was called It's All Right, Ma. And one of the lines in that song, he says that he not busy being born is busy dying. That if we aren't growing psychologically and spiritually in a positive direction, then what we're doing is we're surviving. And so with regard to creating a resolution that would keep you in forward motion, the whole thing about that is getting your life up and running. Again, the question I always ask is, what am I trying to do? And if you are trying to grow psychologically and spiritually, then you're going to need a plan. And that's where Kriya Yoga kind of gives us a format. It gives us a template. Because it's not just about being busy. You know, one of the things I always think about is if a car doesn't run. Let's say, for example, the car needs an alternator. And if we continue to change the exhaust system, and it's the fifth time I've changed the exhaust system and the car still isn't running, what's wrong with my efforts? It's not just about doing. And it's not like we're going to get credit for our efforts. The whole intention of life is for us to perform. That there is something that we have a Dharma, we have a duty, we have a responsibility. And a lot of us are in crisis because, first of all, we haven't really ever separated from the pattern of our bodies. We never really individuated. We never got out of our infantile defense mechanisms. And so a big part of moving forward with your life and employing resolutions that would give you this momentum is to have a plan, to understand what isn't working and what is it that I'm trying to do.
That sounds like a lot of work for an individual, especially for these times. So if somebody wants to try to determine what their Dharma is, or maybe they're doing something now or in a line of work where maybe that person is struggling, let's say, would that be a good sign that they're not following their dharmic duty?
Yeah, I think any type of crisis, any type of problems are usually an indicator that we're still drawing from the outside world. Because the whole thing of becoming an individual, coming or initiating this progressive cycle of growth, requires the connection to this invisible, intangible source of sustenance. So putting your efforts in basically trying to understand what is motivating me, putting your efforts into what is it that I desire is really helpful. And like we always say, like if we desire particles, we will be of a lower animal nature. If we desire waves, we will be of an equally lower human nature. But if we desire the void or the nothing, we will be of, the ultimate divine nature. So putting your effort in trying to desire this invisible, intangible source of sustenance, and then what would be the procedure? How would I go about changing the pattern of my body so that I don't look for something visible and tangible or invisible and tangible? Because that's where the change has to take place. Because if we don't desire the nothing, then of course you don't hear the Om. It's just like with a car. When you turn the key and that thing starts up, you hear the Varum. Well, when the human mind-body starts up, that's when you hear the Om. When matter and mind now come together with this new source of sustenance, then this thing starts up. You get the light in the soul. That's what begins this progressive cycle. Because now you're drawing from a source of sustenance that will give you a different return. Again, the physics of spirituality. Like attracts like. Two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. So when you're trying to troubleshoot your life, as well, if you aren't sure that you're growing, you can look at the things that you're doing. And you start with, well, am I thinking right? Am I breathing right? Am I keeping myself hydrated? Have I eliminated all of the foods that produce cravings and disturbances? And am I exercising right? It's just a simple checklist, but it kind of gives you tangible clues to help you realign yourself with something that's invisible and intangible.
So once we realign ourselves, now is that going to help somebody figure out, are they doing the right thing? Do they have the right job? Are they on their dharmic path?
Well, to answer your question, yes. The average person today is making all of their decisions based on what they think other people want them to do. The average person has not separated from the original pattern of our bodies, which is basically rooted in infantile defense mechanisms. That we seek approval for validation. That we initially seek out, we look for food, we look for mother, we look for approval. Now, the whole intention of this rebirthing process is that you now separate from your dependency upon the tangible, and now you reprogram the pattern of your body. You change the reward circuits in your brain. You change these neurological pathways that now you look for the void or the nothing to produce the same feeling that I'm okay. But that's the conversion that they talked about in religion, that now you draw from a different fuel. You draw from a different source of sustenance. But that will give you a different return. See, one of the things that comes with this internal connection is what they called in the Bible stillness. Because most of the agitation, most of the disturbances comes from our physical bodies seeking validation, that we are constantly looking for something to produce the feeling that we're okay. And what we call normal behavior today, I call neurotic, because we're going from the car to the phone to the computer to the television to the refrigerator to the gym, and it's all driven by this blind need that I want something. Now, once you have changed, you've rewired, the mind-body complex, so now that the body is looking for what it really does need. And the symbol that I always refer people to is breath. That when your breath becomes an anchor, when breath becomes your new drug of choice, then matter and mind come together with new information. Because if every time you're taking a breath, it's reinforcing a feeling in your body that you're okay, the term in yoga is called santosha, contentment, then there's a stillness. Now, with this stillness comes clarity. Because now you have separated from the pattern, and now you're on the path that will lead to your individuating. Now you can start to make choices based on what is working for you. Now you can start to develop your psychological organs. Now you can start to develop, this thing called intelligence. You can now process things, and you can now make decisions based on the operations of these mental functions, as opposed to just being reactive and controlled by forces beyond your scope of power, because your body has all the power.
That makes perfect sense, actually, when you put it in that way. I like that. So I've been hearing a lot of stories lately, and you would think with the new year, with the resolutions and so on and so forth, that people would be moving in a positive direction. But I've been hearing a lot of stories about people that are, things are happening to them, and they're a little anxious, and breakups are happening, and so on and so forth. Now, would you say that's all because they're just not aligning themselves to, this energy field, and kind of allowing other distractions into their life, into their way of thinking?
Well, to answer your question, see, when we are drawing from those limiting sources of sustenance, our minds are small. And when your mind is small, you do feel like a victim, because there's a huge portion of your reality that's outside your field of awareness. You still are experiencing yourself as a separate entity. You don't have this sense of connectedness to a greater whole. You don't have the opening of the aperture of the conscious mind and the realigning yourself with a part of yourself that is eternal. So from that limited perspective, we feel like victims. Things are happening to us. But when matter and mind come together with this other source of sustenance, that's the one dynamic that impregnates the seed of your mind. Now, when your mind starts to open and your whole sense of self realigns itself with a part of yourself that is eternal, then you start to see how things are actually really working. That how we think is what we become. But we're thinking on all of these different levels. And the other things that happen with it, is that you start to see how thought is an energy, and it's capable of producing effects. But again, it's going to be measurable based on the amount of strength you emit it with. So it's our belief that gives our thoughts the power to affect changes in the outside world. Now, with the benefit of internal support, with this sense of confidence that comes with this connection, again with the clarity that comes with this connection, now you're behind the forms. Now you're actually in a position where you can see how you can start to affect changes by changing your thoughts. And the other thing that comes with it, with this broader sense of awareness, is, again, this sense of connectedness to a greater whole. That it's not just about the pain, pleasure, control dramas of my body. You have transcended survival-based motivation. You now have a sense of purpose for an incarnation. But it's a greater purpose. It's not just about my personal desires. But a big part of that comes with this connection. It's the connection that makes that broader sense of awareness possible.
Okay, well, I think that's a great place to pause in our program. We're going to hear a message from our sponsors, so listeners, we will be back with you shortly.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a Samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Kriya Yoga Series 1 live classes and videos. Get your arms around the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga.
You know, the intention of why we practice is to embody spirit, feel connected to the life force.
Kriya Yoga Asana live classes and videos. A cosmically engineered system of exercises to initiate apotheosis. A system of exercises engineered for dining and dancing at the Cosmic Ballroom. Kriya Yoga Series 2 live classes and videos. A practice in open forum designed to facilitate positive growth of consciousness. Get your Labyrinth video.
I find the positive side of it is it pulls a lot of things together.
Kriya Yoga Mantra and Meditation. With repetition comes absorption. Pray on prana and become divine.
At the same time, we all have a unique talent and gift to give back to the universe.
Private sessions. The mysteries of the universe have always been handed down verbally from teacher to student. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
Purnamariya Purnameva Vashishate.
Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, a few minutes ago, I had mentioned the word distractions, and I was thinking during the break that some of the distractions I find for myself is maybe driving to work and having the radio on or a CD on or something like that. If we immerse ourselves in more with silence, do you think that helps bring people about to this realignment that you had talked about earlier?
Well, to answer your question, I think what really happens is that you can actually create any environment. You know, like shutting off the radio is one thing because you find it distracting, but to be able to consciously block out unrelated matter so you can focus on a task at hand, I think is probably optimal. You know, because you don't ever want to become dependent upon your environment. Again, that becomes, I need silence. Because anybody can practice some of these recommendations in a controlled environment. But the intention is to develop your mental capabilities so that you do have the capacity to block out unrelated matter, focus on a task at hand, and you don't need the outside world to be anything for you. And that's what I found the benefit of the internal connection was, that it no longer required me to need the outside world to do anything for me, that I had the benefit of internal support. And so I could be in the midst of, any kind of situation and still be able to maintain that sense of stillness because my body has what it needs. That's very different than when you immerse yourself in an external environment that will produce a desired inner state. Does that help you or answer your question?
Yes, actually it does, and I probably should have answered my own question because those are the words that we hear when we do mantra and all the other classes that we do at the ashram. Do you mind taking a moment and talking to our listeners about this week's Spiritual Advance? What is it that we should be looking at?
Okay, this week, where the focus is on Dharma, it's on duty, that we all have a collective purpose for this incarnation. And the whole thing that we did talk about in a Spiritual Advance is the whole thing that silence is golden. Mm-hmm. To be still and know that we are God, in a sense, to be still and know that we are at one with the rest of this universe. And so once we become what's right for us, once we have separated from our need for external reinforcement, and we are now making choices based on what works for me as an individual, that progressive cycle, that expansion of your field of awareness leads to a sense of this connectedness to a greater whole, that we all do something better than anybody else. See, we're all an intricate part of this mystical body. I love the way that Ralph Waldo Emerson said it, something to the effect that in the beginning man was divided into men as the hand is divided into fingers. That we see ourselves as separate entities, but in reality we're an intricate part of this bigger body. And so we all have a function, we all have a purpose. But it's really not until we divide and conquer before we can unite and stand. And once you have this sense of dharma, duty, responsibility, collective purpose, again, you look at it and you think, how many people today are actually bored? How many people are growing old with a sense of uselessness because they never really individuated. They never really developed this unique talent that they have, and so that when it comes time to give back, they find themselves to be in crisis because they're basically bankrupt. They haven't put their efforts in individuating, in becoming what was right for them. And then when it comes time for us to give back, then it's like we find ourselves empty-handed. Whereas if you are busy becoming what's right for you, making choices based on your values, making choices based on your uniqueness, then when it comes time to give back, you're ready, you're prepared. And so that's a big part of the spiritual advance that that we're doing now, is that we're on week 28. So if you haven't been following along, then you can always go back to week 1 and start to see what are the small steps, so that leads me to this collective purpose. That first I have to develop a sense of self, independent of my pattern. I have to develop the lower mind, like employing strategies, like discipline, develops your psychological organs so that now you can use your mental functions. Now you can start to do, independent thinking, that you have a sense of connectedness to your creativity, your imagination. So now you can start to generate new information, as opposed to just parrot back stuff, that other people have told you.
So it sounds to me like there's no time like the present. I mean, it doesn't matter how old you are, like you're saying, these, older people who are retired and whatever. I mean, they can start this program now.
Oh, absolutely. That's the whole thing about transcendence is that, we transcend time and space. That there is a part of reality that everything is happening at once. But it's all physics. It's how do I access that perspective? And again, if you haven't gone through your points of passage, at age 7, and here you are at 70 and you're trying to go through your first point of passage, your efforts are not going to be worthless. Whatever it is, the advancement you make now in this incarnation, those things you will take with you. But most of us are busy trying, most of our efforts are employed in acquiring things of the world. And like Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. What does it profit a human to gain the whole world and lose your soul? And then, of course, it's like, well, what does it look like when you find your soul? What does it look like when you get the light in your soul? And that's where I think what we're teaching people is very valuable, because we kind of take a lot of the guesswork out of it. What does it look like when you do hear the Om? What does it look like when matter and mind comes together with this other energy field? Because there's a lot of people out there pretending to be doing better than they are, only because we really don't have good leadership. We don't have people that are literally humans in the adult state. But this concept of apotheosis has an evidence procedure. It's not just smoke and mirrors. It's not just something you declare. But there's physics involved. And there's a lot of preparatory work that must be in place. Working with your physical body is one of them. Changing the pattern of the body is enormous. And these are all the things that we educate people in how to do.
Well, thank you. That was a great explanation. And I'm sure a lot of people got a lot of information from that. So I think it's time to start closing down our program for today. So again, I would like to invite the listeners out there to visit the website. You can follow us on Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook. Also available to listeners out there are the online classes. You can just go to the website and click on online classes. It will direct you to Powwow, and then from there you can make your selections. So I would like you to keep those comments and questions and curiosities coming, because Swami does enjoy hearing from you. So before we sign off, any other final thoughts about our program today or our program next week?
Well, I would like to invite everybody to join our spiritual advance. And I think maybe next week we could actually start to maybe look at resolutions more as learning the language of the universe, a way of how do we ask for what we want. I mean, it's one thing sometimes to feel good enough, but then if you don't understand the language of the universe, sometimes you could be asking for things in a way that will not give you the desired outcome. So that might be something we could focus on next week. And with that, I'll wish everybody a good day and namaste, and I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. I look forward to next week's program. Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. I'm Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.